Everybody, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Everybody. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, dear devotees, please accept our humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you so much for joining this morning to hear Srimad Bhagavatam. We have Her Grace Vrindavaneshwari Mataji from ISKCON Philadelphia, and we are on the verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 14, verse number 10. So Mataji, whenever you are ready, we can start off.
Thank you. That was a very lively kirtan. I was very much enjoying it.
I sent you the link.
I saw that. Thank you so much. It was wonderful. So welcome everyone. Good morning. Jaya Madhava Punjabi Hari Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridharadhari Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridharadhari Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Labihari Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridharadhari Shodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Asatari Sattva's Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Asatari Sattva's Divine Grace Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anantakota Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Prem Sikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadara Shivasati Gaur Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai. Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakun Radhakun Girdhar Govardhan Ki Jai. Mayapurdam Ki Jai. Vrindavanam Ki Jai. Jamuna Devi Ki Jai. Ganga Devi Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Ki Jai. Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Jai. ISKCON Harrisburg Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai. Gaur Premanande Haribol. All glories the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga, Hare Haribol. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminati Namane. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravana Pacharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashatate Shatarane. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayana Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottama Devam Sarasvatim Vyasam Tato Jaya Udirayat Nastapraya Shiva Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevadya Bhagavati Uttamashloki Bhaktir Bhavati Naistaki. So good morning, everyone. We're going to read from Srimad Bhagavatam 1:14:10, and I'll read it 3 times, and then we can take turns. And the chapter is actually the disappearance of Lord Krishna. Oops, here we go. Pashyat patan narav divyam boman sadedhikan darunan samshato durad vayam no buddhi mohanam. Pashyat patan narav divyan boman sadedhikan darunan samshato durad vayam no buddhi mohanam. Pashyat patanara vyagra divyan boman sadehikan darunan samshato durad vayam no buddhi mohanam. Anyone else like to read? Pariksha, you are muted.
Yeah. I'm Pashupatan Nara Vyakra Divyan Pauman Sataikan Daudanan Samsato Durad Payam no Buddhi Mohanan. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Pashyupatan Ravyagra Divyan Bhauman Sadehikan Darunan Shamasato Samsato Adurad Bhayam no Buddhi Mohanam. Hare Krishna.
Anyone else? Okay, we will move on. So word for word translation. Pasya, just see. Upatan, disturbances. Nara Vyagra, O man of tiger-like strength. Divyan, happenings in the sky or by the planetary influences. Boman, happenings on the earth. Saidaihikan, happenings of the body and the mind. Darunan, awfully dangerous. Shamsataha, indicating. Adurat, in the near future. Bayam, danger. Na, our. Buddhi, intelligence. Mohanam, deluding. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Just see, O man with a tiger's strength, how many miseries due to celestial influences, earthly reactions, and bodily pains, all very dangerous in themselves, are foreboding danger in the near future by deluding our intelligence. Purport. Material advancement of civilization means advancement of the reactions of the threefold miseries due to celestial influence, earthly reactions, and bodily or mental pains. By the celestial influence of the stars, there are many calamities like heat, excessive heat, cold, rain, or no rains, and the after effects are famine, disease, and epidemic. The aggregate result is agony of the body and the mind. Man-made material science cannot do anything to counteract these threefold miseries. They are all punishments from the superior energy of Maya under the direction of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, our constant touch with the Lord by devotional service can give us relief without our being disturbed in the discharge of our human duties. The Asuras, however, do not believe in the existence of God, make their own plans to counteract all these threefold miseries, and so they meet with failures every time. In Bhagavad Gita 7:14, the Bhagavad Gita 7:14 clearly states that the reaction, the reaction of material energy is never to be conquered because of the binding effects of the three modes. They can simply be overcome by one who surrenders fully in devotion under the lotus feet of the Lord. Amakyana Timaranjashya Kananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unamalatam Yena Tashme Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobistam Sapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadabmayam Dadatis Padvatandika Panchakalpa Tarupisha Kripa Sindhu Vichapatitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnu Vidaya Krishna Prasad Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Charis Vamaniti Namane Sneta Chaita Supernata Bhakmanam Charasa Thurston Prabhupada Gata Pramanam Bhakti Charupanam. So I'll read the translation again. Just see, O man with a tiger's strength, how many miseries due to celestial influences, earthly reactions, and bodily pains, all very dangerous in themselves, are foreboding danger in the near future by diluting our intelligence. So we know King Yudhisthira is talking to his brother Bhishma, Bhimasena, who he's referring to as tiger-like strength. And Bhima, we know, is referred to as having great strength in Srimad Bhagavad Gita as well. So here, what's happening is they're seeing the foreshadowing of Kali Yuga coming in. We're seeing an increase in irreligion, an increase in quarrel, lies, hypocrisy, right? This is some of the symptoms of Kali Yuga. So King Yudhisthira is starting to enumerate some of these symptoms that he's observing, and so he's getting concerned, obviously, right? And here he's pointing out, look, see how these miseries coming from celestial influences, earthly reactions, and bodily pains, right? These are the three kleshas, the Adi Atmika, Adi Devika, and Adi Bodhika. How these three miseries, how they influence us, influencing from reactions from celestial influences. This is the natural disasters that we experience, and the suffering that we have from others, the suffering that we have from our own bodies. So these are all very much a part. We feel it all throughout our own lives. And so here in Prabhupada took us to in this purport, he took us to Bhagavad Gita 7:14, and this is a very well-known verse. Devi hi esa gunamayi.
Hare Krishna. I think Mataji lost connection, so I'm sure she will join back.
It looks like she's frozen.
Yeah, Mataji, if you're able to hear us, I think, yeah, she's back.
Are we back?
Yes,
Sorry.
yes.
I was looking at my own screen and didn't realize until I saw the thing pop up that I lost you guys.
No problem.
Okay. So anyway, I don't know where everyone and what we heard so far, but I'll just kind of recap that the translation is just see, O man with a tiger's strength, how many miseries due to celestial influences, earthly reactions, and bodily pains, all very dangerous in themselves, are foreboding danger. So we do have these reactions, these sufferings from the body, other people, from the demigods, which is bringing about natural disasters. And so Prabhupada brings us to the verse 7:14 in Bhagavad Gita, where it says, this divine energy of mind consisting of the three modes of material nature is difficult to overcome, but those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. So what's happening here is that because the influences of Kali Yuga are coming in, we're seeing how these symptoms that King Yudhisthira is starting to observe here. Krishna is telling us in Bhagavad Gita, well, these are all governed by the modes of material nature, and as the yugas progress, these things get more difficult. They're more and more difficult, but there's a solution, there's a remedy, and Krishna gives us that remedy, which is really to surrender to him. Those who surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it, meaning they can cross beyond the difficulties of the three modes of material nature and overcome these sufferings. And so, how we can navigate this, and like I said, King Yudhisthira is seeing all this happening, and he's asking himself, what's going on? Why is this all occurring? And he's talking to his brother Bhima about this to try and parse out what's to come. Has Krishna left the earth? Has Arjuna quit his body? Is the yuga progressing? What's going on? And so here we talk about the three kinds of miseries, and we'd mentioned them: the Adi Klesh, or the Adi Atmika, Adi Bodhika, and Adi Daivika. These are there, and it says, and Prabhupada says in Srimad Bhagavatam 3.5.40, he talks a little bit about these. He says, "O Father, O Lord, O personality of Godhead, the living entities in the material world can never have any happiness because they are overwhelmed by the three kinds of miseries. Therefore, they take shelter of the shade of your lotus feet, which are full of knowledge, and we also take shelter of them." So, this is Vidura talking to Maitreya in this particular chapter of Bhagavatam, and here he's again discussing the fact that these are really difficult to overcome. In Prabhupada's purport, he says, the way of devotional service is neither sentimental nor mundane. It is the path of reality by which the living entity can attain the transcendental happiness of being freed from the three kinds of material miseries. And so everyone is conditioned by material existence, whether he be a man or beast or demigod or bird, must suffer from Adi Atmika, Adi Bodhika, and Adi Devika. Okay, so Adi Atmika is bodily suffering, Adi Bodhika is suffering from others, and Adi Devika is the demigods, so things that occur in natural disasters. But Prabhupada says in the purport, his happiness is nothing but a hard struggle to get free from the miseries of conditional life. But there is only one way he can be rescued, and that is by accepting the shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And here Prabhupada goes back into the first canto of Bhagavatam, which we're actually in right now. The argument that unless one has proper knowledge, one cannot be freed from material miseries is undoubtedly true. But because the lotus feet of the Lord are full of transcendental knowledge, acceptance of his lotus feet completes that necessity. We have already discussed this point in Canto 1. Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janyati Ashubhai Vairagam Jnanam Chayad Ahetukam. There is no want of knowledge in the devotional service of Vasudeva, the personality of Godhead. He, the Lord, personally takes charge of dissipating the darkness of ignorance from the heart of devotees. So here we're getting a more clear understanding from what we have in today's verse, which is saying this is all very foreboding. This is a very dangerous situation. How can we escape? How can we escape from this? And yet we know through the teachings of the Lord that there is a process. Thankfully, we're not stuck, right? So there's another, just kind of diving in a little bit more into these sufferings in Nectar of Devotion, Rupa Goswami talks about the klesha gni, the relief from stress, as one of the kind of points of devotional service, is that the characteristics of pure devotional service are klesha gni. I can never say that, gni, dissolution of the causes of suffering. So these 6 points are really important. And if you ever do a Bhakti Shastri course, you'll go through this process, the Nectar of Devotion, and get a better understanding of these characteristics of pure devotional service. But klesha gni is the dissolution of the causes of suffering. So pure devotional service brings immediate relief from material distress. That's very relieving. Getting to that pure devotional service is a process, right? It's not going to be instant. The other 6 characteristics of pure devotional service are subadha, which is attainment of auspicious qualities, moksha lagurprit. Those in devotional service deride even the conception of liberation because they have something else better than liberation. So they're basically discounting this concept of liberation because they're saying, no, there's better. Bhakti is better. Devotional service is better. Sudurlabha, which is pure devotional service, is very rare. So here, it's a characteristic of devotional service, of pure devotional service, but it's also saying that a characteristic within itself is the pure devotional service is rare. So we're understanding that this is not common. And Sandrananda Vishesh Atma, pure devotional service, situates one automatically in transcendental pleasure, Ananda. And Sri Krishna Karshani, which is pure devotional service, attracts even Krishna. It is so powerful. So the klesha gni is relief from distress. So let's dive into that a little bit, because that's what we're talking about today, is these kleshas, distress, and how we're seeing the foreboding of the coming of Kali Yuga. So it's diluting even our intelligence, and I'll get into that in a minute, how it's, our intelligence is already, as humans, we have some defects. But let's talk a little bit about distress, because we all experience it. And there's a quote here from Madhurya Kadambini, and which was written by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. So I'll read this. And having sprouted, growing upwards, the creeper of devotional service then unfurls 2 leaves, which are the splendor of sadhana bhakti. So we know sadhana bhakti, right? We're all in the sadhana bhaktas. We're practicing our bhakti through the instructions. The Vaidhi bhakti is the sadhana bhakti, but sadhana bhakti is really just we're practicing bhakti. We're practitioners. We're practicing, just like is anyone in the medical field. They're called practitioners because they're practicing medicine. It's not a perfect science. So the first leave is called klesha agni, dissolution of suffering. And the second is called subadha, attainment of auspicious qualities. The smooth upper surface of the 2 leaves in a preeminent position by the characteristics of spontaneous greed for everything pertaining to the Lord, by genuine affection for the Lord in a particular relationship, is the jurisdiction of the king called raga. So he's talking about very high level, devotion. This is the pure devotional service. And the Vaidhi, both raga and Vaidhi bhakti equally share the qualities of klesha agni, the disappearance of suffering from sin. So that's reassuring, right? And so these kleshas are there, but we can try and get away from them. And so here, and actually in Nectar of Devotion, the kleshas are even expanded upon a little bit more to describe more material sufferings that we have. Avidya, ignorance. So to mistake that which is impermanent to be permanent, and to mistake that which is full of misery to be blissful, and mistake that which is not self to be the self. So how do we kind of dissect this a little bit? What does true ignorance mean? Well, we don't acknowledge that we are spirit soul. So we're mistaking this bodily self, right? The material body for ourself. We're mistaking our mind intelligence for ourself, but true self is actually soul. The true self is actually the soul that connects to God. So this gives us a lot of suffering. Just that alone is going to provide a tremendous amount of suffering, because when we have a bodily identification, we know that the material world has all these sufferings in it. We know the material world also is impermanent. It's not illusion, but it's an impermanent situation. We know things come and go. So this is one level of kleshas, this ignorance, because we can cause so much suffering to ourselves just by this ignorance of who we are and what is permanent, what's not permanent. And I like it says here, to mistake that which is full of misery to be blissful. So what is the night for, for the ignorance is daylight for the yogi. What is daylight for the yogi is night for the ignorant. So for the conditioned soul. And so what's that saying? So the things that the conditioned soul, the jiva, those that are the bodily conception of life, what they see as pleasure, for someone in a pure devotional mood is really painful, because that pleasure is really being derived from material activities. And we want to try and be aware of that. It's hard to avoid. We want to be aware of it and try and improve our Krishna consciousness, improve our devotional lives, so that we can gradually grow away from that. So we have 5 types of kleshas that Rupa Goswami mentions in Nectar of Devotion. The second one is Ashmita, or false ego, bodily identification of me. So this is something that kind of goes into that ignorance. What's the self? Okay. The third one is raga, attachment, desire for material happiness, and those means which we'll give it. The fourth is dvesha, or hatred, repulsion to unhappiness, or the cause of unhappiness. So people do anything they can to avoid distress, to avoid death, which is the ultimate unhappiness. The ultimate distress would be death. And what are the ends that people will go through to try and avoid death? But we all are going to end up there someday. So with those efforts to try and avoid all of the energy that goes into trying to avoid death, what are we doing? We're wasting our time. We're wasting our time in something futile activity, we might call that. It's an exercise in futility. It's not going to get us anywhere, because we're all going to die. We might even die some time earlier than we would hope by just misfortune, by our karma, whatever that comes to. So we don't know. And all the effort that we've put into just trying to avoid death, we could have been putting into, devotional activity. And so the fifth one is adi nivesha, which is attachment or absorption accrued through past births to certain objects, to the means to attain them, to one's body, and to fear of death, right? Again. So this is kind of an expansion on this kind of adi, adi devika, adi bodhika, adi atmika. Those are the demigod, our own bodies and others. This gives us even more to kind of sink our teeth into, that suffering comes from our own ignorance. It comes from our own attachments. And this is really this is truly the adi, the adi atmika, adi bodhika, from others, from our own minds. This is where suffering can really be ignited even more by the more that we sink ourselves into this attachment to material activities, this attachment to trying to avoid, this aversion to suffering, aversion to suffering and attachment to material activity. They're kind of in the same. If we're trying to we're averse to suffering, that's not going to get us anywhere either. We have to accept the suffering, but move through it with our practice, with chanting, with association with other devotees. So this is kind of really that suffering. So I've really talked a lot about suffering so far. Why? Well, because it's so much of what we experience in the world. So I mentioned something about the defects, and here going back to the translation for a minute for today's verse, it says, all foreboding danger in the near future by deluding our intelligence. Well, here we know that we have these 4 defects, and in Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada brings these 4 defects up a lot throughout some of the purports. He goes into them in more detail in the introduction, and he says, a person of the mundane world is infected with 4 defects. One is human is subject to committing mistakes. We are in illusion, we have the tendency to cheat, and we have imperfect senses. Okay, so this is kind of, these are the four defects that we are afflicted with as humans, as conditioned souls here in the material world. And we may have these defects to varying degrees depending on our own person, our advancement in devotional activities, our general consciousness, how much we're, working within the modes and how those are influencing us. We're all in some way or another, infected, or, we have these defects within us. And so it's important that we recognize them. So with today's verse, Prabhupada talks about there's suffering, there's defects, but what do we do? What's the remedy? Well, the remedy is to surrender. The remedy is to surrender to the Lord. Okay. And here, so, there's a quote in this Bhagavad Gita 7:14 that Prabhupada references. It says, Mayam tu prakritim vidyam maya yanam tu maheshvaram, which is, although Maya illusion is false or temporary, the background of Maya is the supreme magician, the personality of Godhead, who is Maheshvar, the supreme controller. So what does that mean? Well, if you've read through Brahma Samhita, there's a whole description. I want to say it's text 45 or 46 in Brahma Samhita, where it goes into a little bit more of an explanation of Maya. And Maya is really, we have the Mahamaya, which is the external potency of Krishna, and we have the Yogamaya, which is the internal potency of Krishna. And like I said, in Brahma Samhita, I think it's like text 45, somewhere in there. In Brahma Samhita, there's a whole long description of how the Mahamaya and Yogamaya are really two different sides of the same coin. When Mahamaya is engaged, right? When Mahamaya is engaged, it's still Krishna. It's still Krishna. It's still Krishna in giving us the facilities to engage in material activity. So if as long as our desire is to engage in material activity and continue our attachment to material activities, then Mahamaya will reign. She'll be in control. However, the moment that we turn to Krishna and say, this material activities are causing a lot of suffering. They're not making me happy. They're not. Everything feels impermanent. Everything feels temporary. So as soon as we start to ponder and say, something's not right here. Something's not right. I feel that there's more to the story. We might hear people say, I feel like there's more to life than just all this material stuff. And that's when they might start to really look within, to pray, to seek counsel in someone who's spiritual. And at that moment when they're starting to really seek a relationship with the divine, with God, with Krishna, then Maya, Krishna turns Mahamaya into Yogamaya. And Mahamaya, who was once helping us to engage in material activities, flips the coin to Yogamaya, who then paves the path forward in our spiritual lives to develop that relationship with God. So it's a beautiful thing, right? We just have to know who we're working with. Are we still calling Mahamaya, and engaging in these activities that create suffering? Or are we trying to engage in a relationship with Krishna through devotional activities? Are we attempting to surrender at the lotus feet of the Lord, which will free us from the kleshas, free us from the modes of material nature? What is our inclination? And it may be some days we might be flipping that coin up in the air and just seeing how it lands. Heads or tails, Maha Yoga. Where are we going to land on that coin toss that day? And the energies can switch and just pull us in any direction, which is why we have to be so careful. We have to be so careful in our lives. And that's not to say that that we won't have these things, that these kleshas interact with us in our lives. There's still going to be famine. There's still going to be natural disasters. We're still going to have aches and pains of the body. our heat and hot water have been off for over a week, and we're not getting heat or hot water till maybe Friday, if we're lucky. Oh my goodness, what happened here? So, sorry, I thought I lost you guys all again. I went to a different screen. So, we may not, we haven't had heat or hot water for a long time now. It just feels like we kind of just gotten used to it. But this is just part of it. And, at first we were like, oh no, what are we going to do? And I was like, okay, just kind of going into accepting the situation. But what we're, no matter what we do in our spiritual lives, we have the tools to move through it. We don't want to, take the spiritual bypass either, right? And we want to make sure that we are processing the suffering, dealing with that, and then going forward. But like I said, even in an advanced state, I am not advanced. So I was like, wow, this is not fun having to take cold showers every day. Our electric bill is going to be really high because we've been running space heaters all week. But this is just what happens. But the more that we move into our spiritual activities, the more that we accept that these suffering is just part of the material energies. It's just how it is, right? It's just how it is. We can't fight it. All that we can do is turn to the Lord, accept the material, the kleshas, accept our shortcomings in this material body, and just beg for the Lord's mercy. Beg for the Lord's mercy. Beg to be able to surrender to the Lord. Because once we surrender to the Lord, then we'll feel some internal happiness. Because when we find internal happiness in our relationship with the Lord, in our ability to serve the Lord, when we find that internal happiness, then that's when we can really rise above some of these discomforts. And that's really the goal. That's the goal of bhakti. The goal of bhakti is not to pretend that none of these things exist. The goal of bhakti is not to pretend that we're fine, even though we're really uncomfortable and inside we're just, it's about truly just accepting the situation and understanding how it's affecting us, accepting the situation, and still turning to a relationship with Krishna, and not taking that as a way to say, why is this happening? Why? Some people in the good times, they praise the Lord, in the bad times, they curse him. So what mentality is that? Where is that mentality coming from? If in the good times we can be like, yes, everything's great. Thank you, Krishna. You're so good to me. You've given me such a boon, right? But in the bad times, like, Krishna, how could you do this to me? Why is this happening to me? Oh, this has happened, or we have this huge expense, or whatever. I have these sufferings of the body now, or someone did something really awful to me, or, I lost a loved one. You're like, Krishna, why? So in a conditional relationship with Krishna, and I'm sure, I definitely don't have a perfect relationship with Krishna at all. I'm still trying to understand my role here as a conditioned soul. I'm still trying to understand that I'm not this body. Right. That's, I'm just trying to get the basics down. But if we are, in one moment praising the Lord for all that he's given us, and the next moment, yelling out, why? This is, then we're not understanding the energies, the Purusha and Prakriti. Krishna's energies are everywhere. His energies are even in the material energies. So we have to see that when Krishna is in everything, that even in the suffering, that the more we turn toward him, the more that we give ourselves to Krishna, we give our hearts to Krishna, we give our lives to Krishna, then we won't feel so much pain. It's not to say we won't experience suffering, right? Because it's just that we won't take the suffering in the same way. Our consciousness will be more geared toward Krishna. And that, okay, Krishna, I accept this situation. And eventually the goal is to go back home to Godhead, where there is no suffering. So as long as we're in this material world, these influences will be there. And Kali Yuga, as we see, King Yudhisthira is enumerating all of the symptoms of the coming of Kali Yuga. And we are in Kali Yuga. We're not getting out of that anytime soon. The situation is going on for another 400 and some thousand years. This is not a temporary situation we're in here in Kali Yuga. So, and it's only going to get worse. We're in the golden age of Lord Chaitanya. It's very fortunate for us. But, you know, one could aspire to try and go back to Godhead at some point, to not have to keep coming back into the miseries of Kali Yuga and the miseries of you know, the material activities. So that our, you know, so how do we get there then? The process has already been laid out for us. We chant, we associate, we listen, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padanam, Sevanam. We have the process laid out for us. There's nothing mystical, right? We all know what it is. But the hard thing is, even though we have the knowledge of what to do, it's a matter of doing it well, right? And that's, I think, for me personally, that's always my own personal struggle. It's like, I know what to do. It's just, and I know the process, and I know the process works, but it's doing it well. Because sometimes the material energies, the sufferings of the material energies are so strong. They have such a pull on us that it can make it very challenging to do this job well, to you know, even to just chant good rounds. And that can be really difficult. So we have to do our best to try and improve our material situation, and improve our material situation not by having lots of money and a big house and all these things, because sometimes that can actually worsen our material situation because it increases our attachment. However, we improve our material situation by making the space for bhakti. And I was talking to a young devotee the other day, and he's in his 20s and he's going through a life change, and he's recently married and going through some major shifts in his life. And he came to realize that, you know, I think sometimes it's, as a devotee, especially when we're young, or maybe if we're new, we think, I'm going to try and not work. You know, I'm going to try and like see if I can just, you know, spend all my time doing devotional activity and not really work or do anything. And then it becomes a very complicated situation. It becomes, especially as a grihastha, it can become very complicated, because then you're either depending on others for support, or you're in a very precarious situation where you may not have good housing, good, you know, be able to put good food on the table. So there's a balancing point. But he was saying to me, which was very wise, and I was very, you know, proud of him for him realizing this. He's like, I realized that as a grihastha, I need to have a job. I'm like, okay, good. He's like, but the job has to be able to support me and my wife, but also it needs to be able to leave space for devotional activities. And I think that's the best thing we could possibly do, is to have, you know, a situation in our lives that's not fully engaging us in material activities, but can support us materially enough so we have space in our lives to practice devotional activities, right? So the best thing that we can do to get ourselves in a situation for improving our devotional life is to make adjustments in our material life so that devotional activities are possible. Because if we're constantly in a situation where we're worried how we're going to put food on the table, or worried how, you know, whether we're going to keep paying our rent this month, that's not ideal. But if we're in a situation where we're working so hard to maintain this big blown up lifestyle, and it's, you know, the work that we're doing to maintain that lifestyle is all consuming, it may think, well, this is very comfortable, this is very cushy, I can now practice my Krishna consciousness because I have this very comfortable situation, but yet we're putting all of our energy into maintaining that comfortable situation. That's not ideal either. So somehow we each have to navigate what's going to help us to map out a situation for ourselves that is going to support us, but also to, more importantly, support our Krishna consciousness. And you can't have one without the other. we can't have our material bodies and our material lives suffer in the name of doing more devotional activities, because then eventually it will pull us down. Eventually it comes to get us. It's hard to sustain. I have personal experience with that. It's very difficult to sustain if we don't have our houses in balance, if we don't have our lives in a better balance to be able to provide for ourselves and our families enough, just enough, right? We know in Nectar of Instruction that I'm sorry, not Nectar of Instruction, in Sri Ishopanishad, we take just enough. What's our quota? What's our quota? Just enough. We're not trying to stock up for 6 months of grains and beans. We take what we need for that, and we take what we need to feed our families, and that's it, and put a little bit aside. So the way to, as we are living in Kali Yuga here in Bhagavatam, they're discussing the symptoms of and foreboding of Kali Yuga coming. And we can see that already. We're like, yeah, we see quarrels, lies, hypocrisy, couples fighting. We see crime and, more natural disasters. We see this. This is all around. Just look at the news. There was another shooting in California yesterday in a school. I mean, for God's sakes, like how many more mass shootings do we have to endure? But this is Kali Yuga. It's a frightening state of affairs here. It's a very dangerous state of affairs here in Kali Yuga. It says foreboding danger. We're in a dangerous, precarious place here. So what we do is we need to secure ourselves materially just enough so that we have enough time and energy to really focus on our spiritual life, and focus on chanting, improving our devotional relationships, giving time to read. Those are all critical things that we have to figure out how to carve out for ourselves. It's a personal endeavor. There is no formula. We all have different needs. We all even require different nutrition, different sleep. We have different requirements for money, what we need for a roof over our heads. We all have personalized individual needs that we have to acknowledge. We have to figure out that formula for ourselves. It's not one scientific equation. But the goal is to make sure that we are endeavoring and growing and improving our devotional activities. That's just it. That's it. Just as simple as that. So wanted to pause here since it's almost 10 of. Any comments, questions, reflections, corrections? I accept plenty of those because I make mistakes all the time.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mataji, for so nice points and explaining this purport with so much of realizations. So devotees will open for question answers. Any comments, any clarification you would like to have, you can unmute yourself, you can type on the chat, you can raise your hand. Please go ahead to clarify any questions.
And I see here you put the Brahma Samhita. It's 44. I was close. Thank you. Yeah, that's I love that Brahma Samhita verse. I've read that so many times, and it's to me it's very clear. It's just if we ever are confused about the relationship between Maya and Yoga Maya, for me that cleared it all up. I was like, I get it now. I get it. It's all Krishna, and he engages one or the other based on our own desires. Like, oh, okay, now I understand. So, thank you for sharing that.
Sure. Yeah, devotees, any questions? Please feel free to unmute yourself. One point at least I got it from here is, although Lord Krishna makes us aware of all the extreme dangers and problems of this world, but he also gives the solution, the ultimate solution to it. So it's not that he's just scaring us; he's directing us in the right path. What is ultimate solution? So thank you for bringing up that, Mataji.
Absolutely. So great. Well, thank you everyone for coming today and listening. And yeah.
Okay, seems like no question today. So that's maybe class was really wonderful. Everything was very clear. It seems like. Last chance. Anyone has any comments, any questions?
No? All right, good. Well, I hope everyone has a fabulous day.
Thank you so much, Mataji, for your association and your explanation of the verse. Thank you, all the devotees. We'll see you tomorrow again, same time, 8 a.m. And Hare Krishna. Srila
Hare
Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Vancha kalpatarubhyo kripa sindhubhyo eva cha patitanam pavnebhyo
Vaishnavi.
Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna. Hare Krishna.